Okay, in that case, we can start, and I
Oh,
will.
oh, sorry,
and-
let's just wait, just maybe just a couple of seconds just to let them kind of catch up with the, I
Very
don't
good.
think they're all in yet.
Actually, only see 3 people, 4, and counting.
Yeah. Okay, it looks like maybe it's kind of evened off now, so.
Very good. We can do our beginning items are fairly unexciting, like roll call and stuff. So why don't we start? I'll call to order this meeting of the Parks and Recreation Commission and Urban Forestry Board for November 9th. During this declared state of emergency, the meeting will be conducted in accordance with California Government Code 54953E. As authorized by resolution, please contact City Clerk at mountainview.gov to obtain a copy of the applicable resolution. All members of the Parks and Recreation Commission will participate in the meeting by video conference with no physical meeting location. And when it is time for public input, I will ask the public to raise their hands and they will be called upon as in turn. All right, so item 1, call to order, which I've done. Item 2, roll call. Vice Chair Filios.
Here.
Commissioner Davis.
Here.
Commissioner Mitchner.
Here.
And Commissioner Summer.
Here.
And myself, Chair Bryant. I'm here too. We're all here. So let's move on to item 3, minutes approval. We have the minutes from our October 12, 2022 minutes. Are there any questions about it? Comments? Seeing none, I will ask the public if they have any comments on our meeting minutes. If you do, please raise your hand. All right, seeing none, bring it back to the committee. Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
Motion to approve.
Okay.
Second.
So we have a motion by Vice Chair Filio, seconded by Commissioner Mitchner. Any further discussion? Okay, let's vote. Commissioner Mitchner,
Yes.
Commissioner Summer,
Yes.
Commissioner Davis,
Yes.
Vice Chair Filios,
Yes.
and Chair Bryant, myself, yes. So the motion passes unanimously. And we can continue to item 4, oral communication from the public. This portion of the meeting is reserved for persons wishing to address the commission on any matter not on the agenda. So if you have a comment, dear members of the public, for an item on the agenda, this is not the time to talk. Speakers are limited to 3 minutes. State law prohibits the commission from acting on non-agenda items. So attendees, I see that there is one member of the public wishing to address us on an agenda item, and that's Bruce England. Bruce?
Thank you, Chair Bryant. This is really quick and really doesn't have to do in particular with PRC, but I've been finding that the links to the meetings, the Zoom links in the agenda files are not consistent and sometimes almost impossible to use. I had one meeting today I couldn't even attend because the thing wasn't really working. I'm probably going to take this up with Heather or document processing with the city and try to strike some consistency. I don't know how much flexibility you all have, or John, if that's your area of how to deal with that, like how to enter the material into the agenda files that go out to the public. So just FYI, I'm going to bring this up with the city clerk. Thank you.
Thank you, Bruce. Any other member of the public wishing to address us on a non-agendized item? Seeing none, I will close this agenda item, which brings us to item 5, new business. And item 5.1 is the Evelyn Park conceptual review and recommendation, project 2160. And which member of staff is going to start?
Good evening. Good evening, commissioners. This is Mary Chris Huang with the City of Mountain View Public Works Department. So I will be here this evening to present the recommendations for the commission to forward to the City Council for the Evelyn Park project. Joining me later in this presentation will be Dave Rubin from Calendar Associates, who is also the consultant working on this project. So as mentioned, we have 2 recommendations we will be discussing. The first will be to forward a recommendation for a conceptual plan, and the next is to talk about naming or selecting at least 2 names for the City Council's consideration of the new park. I'll go ahead and start. All right, so as I mentioned, this is a presentation on the Evelyn Park project. Shown here is a map.
Mary Chris, you're not sharing your screen. I want to make sure that it's not just me.
Oh, I'm sorry about that. All right, sorry about that. Everyone can see the Evelyn Park project presentation. Sorry about that, apologize. All right. Right, so shown here on this slide is a map of the project location. The site, which is bordered in red, was dedicated to the city for park use by the developers of the 525 East Evelyn development. The development is shaded here in orange. The future park measures to be 0.68 acres in size and is located along East Evelyn Avenue near the border of Mountain View and Sunnyvale. Council approved funding for the design and construction of the park in 2021, and Calendar Associates was brought on board as our design consultant. So the above photo here shows the future park in context of the new development, which is underway. The bottom shows the current site conditions as of today. The construction, the developer is currently using the site for construction staging, as we can kind of see in this bottom photo. And this is per an agreement with the city. The developer of the development also intends to be in agreement with the city to install temporary landscape improvements during the interim of the design for the new park. And here are just some close-up photos of the construction staging area, which will also be our new future park site. So as mentioned, the park site is about 0.68 acres in size. This slide and the next 2 are just showing a visual comparison of the site to other existing parks around the city. So here, shown in the blue polygon is Chetwood Park, which is just under an acre. And then now comparing Magnolia Park, which is just a little over an acre. And then closest in being relatively the same size as our future park is the Mercy Bush Park. So our site is highlighted in red. So for community outreach, staff held 2 in-person community meetings to help gather input on features and amenities for the future park. Staff sent notices to residents and property owners within a 750 feet radius of the project site, as well as posted it online through the city website and next door. In the first community meeting, the input was gathered by open discussion and using a dot sticker polling to gauge favored amenities. We then followed up with a second community meeting and presented 3 concepts, which the community reviewed and provided feedback on. And so with that said, I will now hand it off to Dave Rubin from Calendar Associates, who will talk more about the community's input and recommended park concept.
All right, thank you, Mary Chris. Good evening. So at the first community meeting in July, we showed attendees 7 images of potential park features, and we handed out 5 sticker dots to each attendee, and we asked them to place dot stickers next to the feature or features that were most important to them. Based on this exercise, flexible use plaza, habitat garden, picnic area, and labyrinth rated the highest in that order. Play equipment, open turf area, and game tables initially received no votes. Afterwards, we engaged in a more open discussion with the group, and during that conversation, we talked more about park features. We heard that even though play equipment did not receive any votes in the first dot voting exercise, it would be a useful amenity for the park. We also heard that game tables, fitness equipment, and even a small lawn area could be appropriate for this park. So taking this information from the first community meeting, we developed 3 park concepts noted as concepts A, B, and C. And then just to orient you, Evelyn Avenue is shown at the top of the screen with the Hadley Apartments shown on 3 sides of the park. Also, the London Plain street trees in front of the park, in front of the park site would remain. In terms of primary park features, concept A has a multi-use plaza, fitness stations, a play area, and a habitat garden with pathways. This design is organized around pathways that break the site into distinct zones. More active uses are located at the front and center of the park, with more passive uses at the rear of the park. The flexible use plaza is an open public plaza fronting the sidewalk with shaded picnic tables, benches, bike racks, drinking fountain, and trash receptacles. A flower-inspired pavement treatment denotes the intersection of the plaza and primary pathways in the park. Further back into the site, there are 3 fitness stations along a curving shaded path, and each station would focus on a different activity and part of the body. At the heart of the park is a play area surrounded by a pathway and shaded seating for parents. And at the rear of the site, there are decomposed granite walking paths and a seating area among the habitat garden. Drought-tolerant planting that attracts birds and butterflies would be selected for this part of the park. All 3 of these concepts were presented at the second community meeting on September 26th. We explained to attendees that they weren't limited to selecting just one of the concepts and that they could tell us that they liked aspects of multiple concepts. Again, we performed a dot voting exercise and had attendees rank the 3 concepts in their order of preference. So based on that exercise, concept A was the most preferred concept and concept B was the least preferred. Following dot voting, there was a group discussion to hear more from attendees about why they liked their preferred concept and how it could be improved. The group generally agreed that including a play area made sense since there isn't another park nearby. And it was also important to the group to have the park appear open to the public with lots of natural shade. So based on the comments that we received on at the second community meeting, concept A was modified slightly to increase connectivity between the plaza and the sidewalk along Evelyn Avenue. Banding in the pavement was added to the plaza to reinforce circulation paths and denote the plaza as a gathering space. More shade trees were added in the plaza and a fence was added around the play area. So this represents the preferred concept that we're bringing before you this evening.
Great, thank you, Dave. So that concludes the first recommendation. Staff is requesting the commission to forward to council. Now moving on to the next item, which is selecting at least 2 names to bring to the city council. At the second community meeting, attendees were also invited to submit to staff suggested park names. Again, notice was mailed out and as well as a posting on Nextdoor referring residents in the community to the city council park naming policy. The city council established this policy, which includes criteria for naming city parks and recreation facilities. The process is then to have the commission recommend at least 2 names which staff will bring to council. So 25 different park name suggestions were received and included in the report. Staff would like to recommend 2 names that meet the city council policy, and they are Evelyn Park and Flower Mart Park. So the now moving on to public art. This will also be incorporated into the new park. Staff will go through a separate process with the Visual Arts Committee in the late winter and will plan to provide a recommendation to council in the summer of 2023. Following tonight's meeting, staff will bring the recommended concept and names to the city council for approval. And once council approves, we will prepare the bid documents and we anticipate starting construction by winter 2024. So that concludes this presentation. I, along with staff, as well as Dave, will be available for any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So before we move to receive public input, the commission will have some questions. All right, commissioners, do you have clarifying questions? Chair Filius, Vice Chair Filius.
There I go. I'm unmuted. Just a couple of questions with regards to the public input. I want to first obviously compliment staff and the everybody that worked with you with regards to reaching out to the public. How many people were actually at each one of those? And I'm only curious because the complex isn't inhabited. I'm sorry, I don't know the correct word there. There isn't anybody living in the actual complex that surrounds the park yet. Is that correct? I mean, not that the park's only going to serve those people, but, and thank God some people came that were from somewhere in the neighborhood, but how many actually participated?
Yes, so during the first community meeting, when we just kind of kicked off the project, and we gauged what amenities was desired for the park, it was 4 members of the community. And then in the second community meeting where the concepts were presented and voted on, there were 3 community members. And you are correct that the development is still in construction. So the one that's on 3 sides of the park is not occupied.
Thank you.
All right, Commissioner Summer.
Thank you. I have also a question about outreach. Was there any specific outreach done to the Evelyn Family Apartments, which is the affordable family housing that's right next to the Hadley on the corner of Bernardo, which is also in Mountain View? There's 116 units there. Because that's occupied now, and it seems like we could have done some work with those folks.
So the mailing, the mailing of the postcard was to 750 feet within a radius within the project site, and that includes just the city of Mountain View residents, and then the posting for the next door, I believe, was done for nearby residents of the neighborhood. So not sure if that would include.
So we didn't like put anything up in the lobby of the building next door, it sounds like. Okay, that's too bad because those folks are within walking distance. And then my next question, I'm wondering if Mr. Rubin could clarify on the plan where fencing is proposed. It's always hard to read in the symbology, and I think I understand it, but it's a little hard to tell like where a gate would be located and such.
Yeah, Mary Chris, do you mind going to the plan, the preferred plan? Yeah, so the play area would be fenced. It's not indicated at this point, but there would be a gate where the fence crosses the pathway that surrounds the play area.
So you were intending it to be very kind of close and tight up on the play area. Is that correct?
We've indicated on the one side that it was close to the play area. On the other side, it's actually behind the seating across the path.
So it'd be 2 gates, one on either end of that path that you show.
Right.
Okay. And maybe, well, anyway, we could talk about that. All right. And then another question, did you do any analysis on the amount of shade that would be cast by the buildings? Because they're 5 stories and this is on the north side. Did you study how much of the site would be shaded in a, and what that, how that would change over the course of the year?
Yeah, it is something that we looked at, you know, and the bulk of the shade, especially in the middle of the day and later in the day, is on the bottom, the south side of the site and the west side of the site. You know, I was actually, we were looking at aerial photos through the year, and you know, in the middle of summer, most of this park is actually in direct sunlight, with maybe the exception of the southern edge. But it does, you're right, it encroaches with the 5-story buildings in winter. So coming into like these months right now, you know, a third of the way into the park, even in the afternoon. So it's a factor that we were considering. And so you'll notice, like in this particular scheme, we have the play area more towards the middle of the park. The plaza is out in the sunnier area of the park. And that's where we've got shade trees located accordingly.
Thank you. And then my final question, what do we know what species of trees are being planted by the Hadley on their property? We didn't get any information. That looks like it's over their parking podium, so I expect they're not big, but do we know what those are?
I believe we have plans that show the species, but I don't know the answer to that right now at the meeting here.
Great, those were my questions. Thank you.
So I will just say that walking around the Hadley, what I saw was Japanese maples and magnolias right close next to the buildings. And then there were other trees, but those were the ones that are right next to the buildings, so they would be visible from the park. Commissioner Mitchner, your turn.
So I just had a couple questions related to the schematics. So I'll just ask both questions. The first one is just, there are some existing sidewalks there now, and I just wanted to understand how those integrate with this plan, whether they're the ones that are sort of off this map to the side, or whether they're part of the schematics of this plan. So maybe if you could point those out. And then also if you could just point out, I'm pretty sure I know the answer, but the proposed habitat garden, where that is, and then is that sort of fenced off so that that area cannot be, you know, can people mingle amongst the plants, or is that an area, you know, the entirety of which could not be stepped on or walked through?
Yeah, I'll answer those. So the sidewalk is actually not being touched that fronts Evelyn Avenue. So the park improvements that we're showing here stay entirely behind the city's right of way. Does that answer your question?
Actually not. I was talking more about the side, the sidewalks on the sides. Right now, you know, there's the buildings and there's some sidewalks that are next to the buildings now. Can you show me where those existing sidewalks are on this map?
I don't know if you can see my cursor since Mary Chris has, but Mary Chris, can you kind of trace the outline of those pathways that basically form a U shape within this area?
Yes, is my cursor showing by any chance?
I can see it.
All right, yes.
Can't see it, however.
So the sidewalk that's part of the development is along here, kind of.
Mary Chris, why don't you start at the upper left so people can look for it?
All right, great. So yes, so here the development has some walkways here around
Okay,
surrounding the park. Believe it's some type of decorative concrete or pavers.
Yep.
And it goes through the frontage of these homes over here or units. And then right here it is essentially a walkway, but it is wider because it's an emergency vehicle access.
okay, yeah, so I just wanted to differentiate what's existing today versus and how that integrates with the plan, so that helps, thank you.
And then your second question was about the habitat garden. It is not fenced. We do have a decomposed granite walkway that goes through that planting area. And there would be some seating provided at that one location in the lower right, but that is not fenced off.
But I assume people can't, it would be a bad form to say throw a Frisbee around and be in that area, correct?
Yeah, it would not be the most ideal place to throw a Frisbee. Just given that
In that
it-
area, to be clear, it's this area where this seating is cutting in, is that?
yeah, it's everything behind the play area, all the way to the back of the site, and the pathway is within that habitat garden.
Okay, so there's no lawn area then, is that?
Correct. This concept does not have a lawn.
Okay,
All right, let me ask my questions. So now I had several questions, but now I have a brand new question. So the habitat area, is it going to look like a meadow, or what will be, how will people know that this is, you may look but not touch as for?
It would not be a meadow per se. I think it would be a mix of grasses, but also shrubs, perennials. I think we would be selecting a plant palette that's both drought tolerant, but also would attract, hummingbirds, butterflies, that kind of a palette. So one of the things that could be done to help support that kind of a space is there could be maybe an interpretive sign, just to help people know what's happening in that space. And that might be cited where we've got that seating area.
So if I wanted to come and hang around with my neighbors and just sit somewhere with my neighbors and talk, where would I do that?
Within the habitat garden, you see that semicircular area in the back.
So it's like a structured, formalized place for sitting, as it were.
Yeah.
All right, let me ask you, at the very front, there is a row of trees, and then there is like a green patch, and then another tree on the right edge. What is that green patch fronting Evelyn Avenue? You know what I'm?
Yeah, I do. So that's a planting area that essentially is providing some buffer from the street on that side.
And why is it not a tree? Why is it a green area?
Well, I think we're talking about the same area. So we do have a tree planted, or are you talking about right behind? There's an open area where we don't have a tree. Is that what you're referring to?
Right, there is the fire emergency lane, then there is a tree, and then there is green.
Gotcha.
And then there is the row of trees.
Gotcha. I mean, there could be another tree there. We did leave that open just because we have some utilities in that area. Just we wouldn't want to be planting on top of a water line, but that's the kind of thing, we could probably get a second tree in there if we moved the other one further to the right, as a possibility.
Which leads me to my question. What is the entrance to the park? Where do people? where do you come into this park? What is the main entrance to the park?
Yeah, so the main entrance, I don't know if you can see it under the canopy of the trees, but we have a park sign that's in a planting area.
No, I
Um,
can't see it, which is why I'm asking.
Yeah. So I don't know if you can see Mary Chris's cursor, but
Yes, I can.
we're indicating a park sign, and the largest opening into the plaza is just to the left of that, and that's aligned on this this kind of focal plaza, that flower inspired decorative pavement I mentioned in the presentation. That's really the primary entrance to the park. And it's a wider area that's connected to the sidewalk. And then to the right of that, we've got a couple of other connections, but they're secondary. Those are not primary.
So the plaza is basically in the shadow, in the shade of those trees along Evelyn.
Correct.
So I'm trying to just keep this to questions, but maybe I'm just keeping it to questions. Where do you think the people will come who will use this park? Will they come from the Hadley or whatever this development is called? Will they come from the sidewalk? Do you have an idea?
I think the answer is both. I think there will be users that come from the Hadley for sure. But there are, as Commissioner Summer mentioned, there are other multifamily complexes nearby. And so they would be using the sidewalk on East Evelyn to get to this park, whether it's from the east or from the west. So, I think that's why we wanted to leave the connections of the park to the sidewalk, not necessarily focused on one area only, and provide multiple openings.
So from the Hadley itself, the three sides facing the development are porous, and people could just come in that way.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, at the front of the park, there's a major path, or not major, but a significant path that goes east-west, where they could come in there. And similarly, at the rear of the site, there's a couple of other connections. And so that there are multiple opportunities to enter the park.
Good, thank you. Commissioners, any other questions before I open this to comments from the public? Commissioner Summer.
That's one last question, thanks. Since I don't see a scale bar on this, at least not the one on the screen, could you indicate about how large are those trees that, the circle that you drew that are next to the play area? Like what would the diameter be that you've drawn?
Those are
20
about
feet?
25, I think, is what we drew those at.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Mhm.
And so now an explanation for the rest of us, 25 what?
25 feet.
I was asking to try and get a sense of the scale of, so what they have drawn is a tree with a 25-foot canopy.
So that would be like a crepe myrtle, for example.
That would be a fully grown crepe myrtle, probably.
All right, very good, thank you. I'll now invite the public to address us on this agenda item. And at this point, I see two members of the public wishing to address us. Bruce England, you're first on my list here.
Thank you, Chair Bryant. Bruce England speaking for Green Spaces Mountain View. I just have 3 quick points. I saw in the staff report, one of the name options was for Joan McDonald, and I know there's a KX rule on that. So you can't apply that. Nonetheless, just to put the bug in your ear that once Montaloma Park space is considered, that her name ought to be considered, even if there's some kind of placeholder, clever opportunity to make that happen ultimately. Second of 3, you might be aware, maybe not, that the K5 is being revised through VAC for CIP projects. This might not affect this park, but I'm just raising that because you mentioned the K5 angle in the staff report. And lastly, I realize this is a small park, but not having restrooms or a water fountain, maybe there is a water fountain, I'm just not aware of it, but that those amenities really ought to be here. There's no other place that I'm aware of for public facing restrooms anywhere along that stretch of Evelyn. And Evelyn is undergoing improvements to accommodate bicycle and pedestrian, especially bicycle travel. There's an undercrossing planned at Bernardo, and I think at Mary on the Sunnyvale side, and also at Castro, Evelyn. I don't know if that can happen, but it sure would be great if it could happen. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, Dean Birini.
Hi, this is Erica Freeman and my husband Dean, and we live right next door to the Hadley in the Evelyn family apartments. I wanted to address a couple of issues. First of all, we attended both community meetings and we really, really like this plan that has been presented tonight. The first community meeting, we did get mailers for both community meetings. The first community meeting was in July. It was scheduled to meet at 5:30. And a lot of my neighbors here in this apartment building probably couldn't make it because it was too early in the evening for them to get from work over to the community center. The second meeting in September was held at 6:30, which made it a little bit easier for people who are working regular hours to attend. But we did get mailings. I know that there was a question raised earlier about how many people heard about it. I'm sure everyone in my apartment building got something in the mail, but the scheduling so early in the evening made it hard for most people to get there.
Yes, and this is Dean Bierney. I do like this park design. I think it's a wonderful interpretation of the concepts that we've reviewed and approved for the park. And I would recommend that the council, the commission, advance this plan to the park. I'd also like to request that the name of the park be chosen to be Flower Mart Park. And that'll be it. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, Jessica Chauhan.
Sorry, this is actually Amy Rose. Do you want to let Jessica speak?
Jessica was just, yes, but she has, yes. Why don't you wait, Amy, since I called
Sure.
her? Jessica, would you like to address us?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, great. Hi, everyone. Thank you for your time and this great presentation and rendering of this park. Very excited for it to come to fruition. I do want to ask that the commission consider alternate options for the bottom right portion of the park to be able to use that space to, for people to meet, mix, play, and just utilize the space more. I think the current plan for it is a wonderful idea. However, we're so limited on park space that hopefully making it a space that's more, that can be utilized more by people rather than looked at is an option as well. Appreciate your time. Thanks.
Thank you, Jessica. Amy Rhodes.
Thank you. I just wanted to address the naming of the park. Is that appropriate right now?
Yes.
Okay, so thank you, Chair. I submitted the name recognition or name for Lepe Inago, and I don't know how many of you are familiar with him. If you've heard of him, he actually was an Ohlone who was born and lived most of his life in Mountain View. We actually have a tremendous amount of information on him, and he is essentially a survivor. He is someone who survived invasion of the Spanish. He survived the mission colonization. He survived the gold rush with the flood of Americans. He really lived a very long life, and it's actually one of the most well-known, most documented Ohlone. And unfortunately, the land that he lived on, you know, is now Moffett Field. His gravesite actually had a marker, and unfortunately, that is now a parking lot. And it disheartens me that we actually have so many parks named after, which are really colonizers, and no parks named after our first people, the Ohlone, and especially this is a really important individual, which I think deserves not just a plaque or a sign, but actual park. So people start asking who he was and why he was important to the city of Mountain View.
Thank you, Amy. Thank you
Mhm.
for coming and giving your feedback.
Mhm.
Is there any other member of the public wishing to address us on this item? Seeing none, I'll close the public input portion of this item and bring it back to the PRC. And I see that Commissioner Mitchner has a question, comment, begin the discussion.
Yeah, I mean, this is just to sort of make a comment for me to introduce. This won't be my specifics on the design, but I just wanted to sort of start off by saying, you know, I'm a little uncomfortable with how we got here tonight, just because of the very limited number of people who provided input at the two community meetings. You know, the first meeting had 6 people, and then largely based on their feedback, you know, 3 concepts were presented at the second meeting, which only had 3 people, and it sounds like maybe some of those 3 people were the same people who were at the first meeting. And then after that meeting, the 3 plans were whittled down to this one concept. So, you know, I just want to say, you know, I totally thank the community members for participating, and I absolutely wish there were more of them, because the community involvement is critical, especially amongst the nearby neighbors. But given the low numbers, I kind of hope that we can be open to modifications tonight, maybe more so than we would in other design reviews where there were larger numbers providing input at the community meetings. I just, you know, in this case, I think there's, you know, just doing a little bit of math, I think there's going to be 700 to, you know, maybe 1,000 people who are going to be living in this new development. And I just want to be sure that we create a plan that will accommodate a wide range of amenities that large group might desire, including maybe some room to move around a little bit. I would also say that, you know, I would be totally open to, you know, if we make changes tonight, to bringing this back to a future meeting before it goes to council. That way, those that attended the 2 community meetings and others would have an opportunity to comment on changes that we might make tonight. And again, maybe we won't make changes, but I just wanted to at least be open to that, given the very limited number of people who attended those meetings and the large number of people who are going to be living in this complex.
Thank you. Who would like to go next, commissioners? Commissioner Summer.
Thank you. Yeah, and I'll pick up there where Commissioner Mitchell left that. You know, it's interesting how to involve the community that doesn't exist yet. That is the problem that we're facing, because the adjacent apartments, the Hadley, is under construction and, you know, currently leasing, but the people don't seem to be living there for the most part. Maybe there's been a small amount of move in. And the area is a little bit cut off, it seems, from a lot of the rest of Mountain View. And so we really have, you know, maybe the mobile home residents that could walk there, and the residents of the Evelyn Avenue family housing that could walk there. And it's a little hard to know whether more public outreach is going to be productive. Theoretically, this meeting is that, and so I guess I'd like to hear what the other commissioners think about this subject. Obviously, for my part, I wish for more outreach always, but I also, we want to get on with things as well because it's an important addition to this area. I do have some other comments. Shall I go ahead with those, or do we want to talk more about this outreach just item first?
Why don't we finish with the outreach, which should not take us too long, and then go on to the more detailed.
Sounds good. Yeah.
Vice Chair Filios.
Maybe I should say, again, earlier when I asked the question about how many people, because there was no one living in the Hadley yet, or very few, if any. First of all, I want to compliment the people that did. I don't want to make them think that I don't value what they have said. I thank God they did provide some input. So that, but I join my two colleagues about wondering about. I got to believe there's going to be a lot of people here, as Jessica said, where they're going to feel that they need a gathering spot, whether it's for a picnic of the complex, whether it's they want to put up a badminton net just to play badminton, or a portable volleyball net to play portable volleyball, things like that, where that lower, I guess you say the lower right-hand corner, maybe if we turn that wall around and put it along the perimeter of the park and made the meandering paths less meandering, to provide an area for gathering, and whether it and impromptu gatherings. I'm at a loss for words there, but that's my thought. It's kind of, I got to believe that those people are going to want that kind of space, given the number of people living there and the fact that it is, a 5-story apartment situation, and the surrounding area are apartment type living. So.
Yeah, let me, Commissioner Davis, it's your turn, but let me ask Mary Chris, is this area that the developer has dedicated to the city, do the residents of the Hadley have their own private, like, space, open space that's only for them? Or is this basically going to function also as their central meeting place, as it were?
Yes, I think when I had a little tour of the development, I believe there was some sort of like recreational facilities, the lobby being one, having a game room of some sort, but I don't believe to the extent of outdoor space. I believe the park will serve for that purpose.
Okay, I thought that was important for us all.
Actually, that's not correct. There's a pool. If you look online, you can see, follow that link that your photograph showed. You can see there's a ton of amenities. They do have an outdoor space in each building block, and there's a central pool.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Commissioner Davis, your turn.
Thank you. I think my fellow commissioners have pretty well articulated the primary concern that I had. And I spoke with Director Marchand about this, the same issue of the intensity of community input and advancing the park design based on that. I mean, if 3 people showed up and said, we want a hockey rink, would this plan reflect a hockey rink? I don't know. So I'll appreciate hearing later from Director Marchand, probably the city's intention of figuring out how to get more intensity of community input, particularly in this situation where it is sort of a chicken and egg of We don't have a community yet to provide input, but we will soon have hundreds of people. Does this plan represent what those hundreds of people will want? So I think that's been pretty well covered. I didn't want to throw a lot of subjective design opinions in here. I sort of questioned, that if the tot lot was a low ranking on the community input that was received, it seems to be fairly central in the design. It's kind of the core of the park, and apparently fenced, which to me feels a little awkward. It kind of isolates a central portion of the design for something that's, with this level of input, a low priority. I do feel, and again, this is highly subjective, but that the open space is fragmented.
So Commissioner Davis, let me interrupt you. We're kind of focusing right now on the public input, or what kind of public input there was. And then we'll, having talked ourselves through that, we'll look at the design considerations. And I'd like to chime in and say, I in no way think staff didn't do all the work that needed to be done on collecting public input, but you cannot collect public input from 750 people who don't live there. And it's great to know that the family apartments on the corner were contacted, and that at least some people who live there gave their input. The location itself is kind of strange, because the next street in is basically Sunnyvale. So I guess they didn't participate in this. And so there's the family apartments, there is this development, and then quite a bit further on, there are various townhome complexes. So there is a plot of land to develop as a park. There is the money there. I don't think we can get the input of the people who aren't living there yet. So following, basically, I think we're all in agreement. Well, maybe I'm talking a little prematurely, but I certainly agree with Joe that I feel we can participate more actively in the design of this park, in thinking, what will the people who live here, what will they want? And just basically use the logic of what people tend to want from a park, and what makes sense given the context of this building. So why don't we? And I will also say that I love the park design. I'm just questioning whether it'll work best for what I assume will be families and young people who will want to find a town square for them to meet, which seems to happen a lot in our smaller parks these days. So I personally feel fine if we delve more deeply into park design today. Commissioner Michener.
Yeah, and I just want to reiterate what I said, out of respect for the people who did participate, if we do make significant changes tonight, I'm totally open, and we can check with Director Marchant and on the timeline, but I'm totally open on, having this come back, not being final tonight, so that people have a chance to look at it and provide feedback at a subsequent meeting, if the time frame allows for that, and if we feel like we made significant changes. I just feel like that would be sort of the right thing to do.
Certainly makes sense to me. Commissioner Summer.
Thanks. Yeah. On that same line, I have a lot of respect for the people that made the time to participate. And I want to listen to their input, but I do think that we're sitting here as a commission that's kind of representing the people that don't live here yet. And so we have to bring our, expertise and knowledge of the city to that as well. And hopefully we can find a way to blend all those perspectives together. And keeping in mind that this is the public park, but it's really in a location that mostly will serve these apartment buildings, the adjacent apartment, and some of the apartment buildings nearby, some of which are even in Sunnyvale. So it seems to me that what you said earlier, Chair Bryant, was accurate, that maybe it is an okay opportunity for us to reflect our own thinking as maybe more so than some of the other parks that we've reviewed.
Director Marchand, I think we've put you on the carpet here.
Would you like me to respond to that, or do you have a specific question?
I think the commission is leaning towards asking for some possibly significant changes, although my own ask would not be that significant, I think. But the idea of asking for changes to the design and bringing it back to the commission so that the public and the people who have already given their input have a chance to look at it before it goes to council. Could that be accommodated into the timeline that you were thinking of?
Absolutely, and I support that idea.
Perfect. Commissioners, are we all on board for this? All right, no one is saying no, so the answer is
yes, I'm on board with that.
Okay, excellent. So I think what we need to do now is just go down, just share our ideas.
Chair Bryant, can I ask just a kind of a process question before you get started?
Please.
And I'm gonna put I'm going to put Dave on the spot.
Yeah.
And since he's been working on the design, Dave, is there a preferred way to go about reviewing the elements as we go around compared to going commissioner to commissioner? And just seeing if you had any suggestion as far as process, what might be helpful. And Chair Bryant, I hope you're okay with that.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I think what we can do is we can hear the first couple of commissioners' comments, and I think what we're going to hear are some common threads. And if we, as we get further into the list of commissioners, if we start to say, okay, yeah, I have the same comment, I think we need a lawn or something like that, make that statement. But then we start to hear some consensus, and it gives us enough direction that we can actually make revisions to this plan.
Commissioner Summer.
I believe Commissioner Michener had his hand first.
Very good.
Want to...
Commissioner Mitchell.
All right, so I'll just kick it off. I guess I would like to see.
Not to interrupt, but I did have a process suggestion.
Okay, go ahead.
So in the design field, I guess the lingo is you've got the program, which are the elements that you want to put in the park, and then you have the design. And it does occur to me that it might make sense if we separated those out so that we could be clear that we agree about the bits we want to put in here, but we may not agree with the way they're arranged or some of the other design. Do you want to take that as a way to approach it? The program appears to be the things that the community voted on, and then so that would be things such as the labyrinth flower thing, the play area, the plaza, that's and the fitness circle things, that's program. So anyway, I offer that as a thought.
So I think rather than what I heard us all saying, and I had actually intended to kind of frame our conversation that way. I think I heard us all saying that we wanted a gathering place that would be flexible and that the community of users could use somewhat flexibly for whichever way they wanted to use the space. So I'd be happier if we talked about what we feel is missing, and maybe that's what you're talking about, Commissioner Mitchell, Commissioner Summer, in terms of the program, rather than say, I mean, I love the labyrinth, I love the nature area, but I really miss for myself a more free form area for the community to be able to use. And I'd like that, I would start from what I see missing than trying to place differently the things that are there. Commissioner Mitchell.
Okay, so yeah, in terms of that sort of a gathering area, my preference would be that there be some lawn area, and that maybe that is the gathering area, or I'm not exactly sure what we mean by gathering, but I think it would be nice for people to be able to kick a ball back and forth, or as Commissioner Filio said, throw up a badminton net, or I don't know, barbecuing probably isn't I'm not going to throw up barbecuing. Somebody else can bring that up if they think. I like the idea of a habitat garden, but I would make it smaller, and maybe it could be along a perimeter or something like that. I think in gaining some more space, I could see, there's a lot of hardscape here. If the whole thing got sort of shoved, it's hard to do this with, I can use my cursor on my screen, but nobody else can see that. But if everything got moved a little bit closer to Evelyn, I'm giving up some of that that plaza area. I'm not sure how nice it is going to be to sit right next to Evelyn Avenue anyway. It's nice to have a buffer area, but maybe we could gain some space there. It sounds like that area on the right, maybe it does have to be that wide for emergency access, but if not, we could gain a little bit of room there. Sort of separate from this whole from this part of the discussion, we haven't talked about it, but I hope that that the parking is well marked, because otherwise people wouldn't know. You just sort of fly by and you don't know where to go to park, and there's an assumption maybe that this is a private park for this development. So to be inviting, I really hope that there's good wayfinding on where people can park, whether it's cars or bikes or whatever, and that it is truly a open to the public park. So I think those are my first thoughts. I like the trees. I like the habitat garden, but I would make it smaller and maybe off to the side somewhere where people could sit. And those are my initial comments.
I will just jump in here slightly inelegantly, but there's something I need to unburden myself of. I sat on one of the benches in front of the Hadley, and I looked at Evelyn Avenue, and there's very few in front of the park. There's very few street trees. The street trees to the left and street trees to the right, but in front of the park, for some reason, there are no street trees. And you look across 4 lanes of traffic, the Caltrain line, the light rail, and then 4 lanes of traffic on the other side. And I was thinking, if I were like a person living there or having a kid or with a dog, I don't want to sit there and listen to this endless traffic and the trains and the noise. So to me, we need to be conscious of where this park is. Pushing anything towards Evelyn, I think, would be a real mistake. To me, this park needs to be enveloped in trees so that Evelyn is not visible. And then what happens inside, let's talk about it. But to me, there aren't anywhere near enough trees. And you can have a natural area in the shade of trees, under the canopy of trees. But we need to remember where this park is.
No, Chair, I mean, let me just to clarify, I would not remove any of the trees. My thought was that if you look at this as a grid, say, there's sort of 2 rows of grid just above where the playground is, and I would just maybe move things a little bit. I mean, I don't know. I don't know whether that's 8 feet or something like that, but I absolutely would still have trees and shrubbery, whatever it takes to minimize the view and the noise of Evelyn Avenue.
No, I didn't think you meant taking out trees.
No.
I just want to make, which I will continue making tonight probably, an impassioned plea to add more trees and to make this a protected space instead of open to all of that traffic.
No, fully agree.
All right. So Sandy.
Thank you. One thing that's troubling me about the way even we've rendered this out, with the apartments and the surroundings sort of faded out into gray, we're sort of acting as if it's not there, but it is there, and it's huge. It's a 5-story building. It's almost the biggest type of density that you're going to see in Mountain View. I mean, I can only really think of 1 or 2 other taller buildings in town for residential use. And by graying it out, we sort of turn it into this background, but it's not. It's massive, and it's kind of creates a courtyard space, which makes it unlike any other park that we have. And so by necessity, it needs to be more urban. But yet I do agree with the sentiment that you're expressing. It's still a park. It's still meant to be, green and full of plant life and hopefully other kinds of life. And so it sort of needs, I think, to be treated more like it was in San Francisco or something, where you're trying to find a way to bring that natural element in, but you still need to acknowledge the presence of these huge buildings. And so I don't think we've adequately come to terms with the fact that this is going to be shady. It's extremely shady because of the buildings already. And in fact, we might, if we plaster trees everywhere, we could be making it so shady that you don't even want to use it at all for 6 months of the year. So right now, I don't have enough information about that. We need to do a shadow study, really map where the shadows fall. And that'll affect where to put the trees and what kind of plants we can, expect to grow well. The other factor here, and I do also think this has been brought up, this space can support really large trees. It will need really large trees to fit in that courtyard scale. You could put, and so, I mean, this is a little different direction. Less trees, but really big. And you would create a similar amount of canopy, but it would be more in the scale of these. I don't know what's a 60-foot tall building. I don't know what the plinth height is on this, but okay, 50 to 60-foot tall building. We can be putting some, native sycamores, or an oak would be great, but they are pretty dense shade, maybe a valley oak or something. And you won't find that kind of tree anywhere in this complex or even really nearby, because it's all over underground parking and you cannot plant a gigantic tree like that. So this is the place for big, big, big trees, bigger than we plant in our neighborhood parks normally. So I would really like to see us look at, in the middle of this park somewhere, a very large tree. And it makes me think of, Mercy Bush Park or Mariposa Park, where there were already some pretty big trees to begin with, and they make the space fabulous. And now here we're starting from scratch. We really need to think about what it would be like to have a large tree. So anyway, I just kind of maybe overdid it on that, but another aspect of the whole kind of graying out of the background is that we're not really thinking about what's happening along the building edge. We've got the main lobby, which I do think that there's sort of this nice promenade that we have that crosses over to the leasing space, which will eventually become something else, I assume. I don't know how long they would maintain a giant leasing space once it's all built and open, but that's kind of nice, right? The residents would go from one main entry to the other. It also is an appropriate thing for the public because those are the public facing spaces. But once we start to get, people having moved into the apartment buildings, you kind of want to shelter a little bit somebody's front door from a park that's open to the public. And I'm not sure we've really thought that through very well, especially on the south and east east edges, where it's just sort of like shrubbery right up to a big wide walkway. It's like we didn't think about what that edge is like. I don't think I would like to see more consideration to how we're going to reconcile that wide walkway. I guess it must be a fire access on the right side of the drawing with the park. And especially because there's just little dinky trees because they're all over the parking podium, how do we want to relate to those front doors? The fencing, I do agree that it's really important for children's safety at the play area, that they can't wander out into East Avalon Avenue, but it's also kind of creating a little prison in the middle that's going to be very insular. I'm not totally happy with the fencing now, but I don't have a good suggestion. And then I do agree, and I think Commissioner Davis really used a good word, and we didn't even let him finish, that this DG path sort of chops up the space, which isn't really all that big. And it is surrounded already by a walkway. So do we really need another walkway with a walkway that's 5 feet from it? And it's just sort of, again, the graying out made us forget that there's already walkways around the perimeter. And then, I always feel like, oh, we shouldn't have so much lawn in our parks. But I think we do need some. And especially because it looks like this building complex, they have a pool and some hardscape courtyards and a lot of nice amenities, but they don't really have much green space. And then that also is true of kind of the general residents of the area. They may have amenities in their complex, but they don't have green space. So I think what I was hearing with the thought of, maybe cut the habitat space in half and do add some lawn that's more open where someone could set up a, impromptu badminton net or throw a frisbee, little frisbee tossing kind of approach might really add a lot here. But that said, I do like the idea of the pollinator garden, and it was a suggestion from the community outreach. I guess I'll yield the floor, but thank you for the chance to share my views.
Commissioner Davis, I did not mean to cut you off, just to finish one subject before we started with the next. So
It was
your
probably
turn.
a wise thing to do. I think Sandy articulated it much better than I could, but I think you really hit on something about, kind of what this space is. And I'd like, we're a Parks Commission. I think we should think of this as a public open space rather than a traditional stereotypic park. And what I see in the design is kind of laying over conventional things like circuitous walkways. I don't know that circuitous walkways make sense here. So kind of picking up on some of the prior themes, what I see in the design is fragmentation of the space that I don't think is, going to be useful to the community in the long run. I already kind of mentioned my feeling about the tot lot in the middle, something that was apparently a low priority in the prior community input has taken on a position of great significance. Now, my guess is when hundreds of people move in, there will be lots of kids and the tot lot will be appropriate. This configuration to me seems to, again, fragment the park, as does the circuitous walkway that connects the exercise courts and that kind of bisects what looks like open green space, which I think is the habitat. So if I was going to start from scratch, I would rethink those uses, try to not fragment the space so much. A couple people have brought up the emergency access way on the right side of this design. There's a really abrupt boundary here, which I'm not sure it needs to be there. If there is a necessary emergency access pavement, maybe that could integrate with a plaza in a way that it didn't make that emergency access way seem so separate, like such a distinction. So, those are little design elements that I'm not going to try and negotiate here in the meeting, but let the designer think about. As Commissioner Summers said, programmatically, I think most of these elements are appropriate, but the way they're configured is fragmenting the space, not integrating it, and could be rethought a little bit. What else did I have? I think that's good for me for now. Thank you.
Who wants to go now in terms of input? All right, then I'll just continue with the fire exit is very, very wide. It's not unattractive because it has some like a zebra effect of grass, but I would so add trees along that edge. I would just, to me, I sat there and I needed to be embraced by trees. And if there'll be shade, it'll be shade, but I'd rather have shade than 8 lanes of traffic, train tracks, and light rail. It's turning it into a pleasant place to be is going to take a certain amount of separating it from Evelyn. And I don't see people walking down Evelyn and suddenly finding the park there. I think this will be for the use of the family apartments, the people living here, and maybe some of the people in the developments that are closer to downtown. Cars travel really fast there. Nobody's going to stop and suddenly say, oh, a park, where's the parking? This is a very small local park, just like Mercy Bush is. So my own preference would be to have the center, not the tot lot. It would be lovely to have an area for the kids, maybe in the corner closest to the buildings, and the center open for people to spend time together in. I personally never have any need for any kind of net, but grass to sit and talk to my friends is always a good a good thing. So I think that the design needs to respond to what the street looks like and how it is indeed encircled by buildings, and it needs to be softened and become a community meeting place. And I wouldn't worry too much about, I would have the entrances really attractive, but coming from the sides rather than from the front. Because I considered walking from downtown where I live to this park, and there's 2 freeway off ramps on the way. I decided that this isn't where I wanted to walk. So it's not a walkable area. The sidewalk isn't wide. I think this is a small local park like Mercy Bush is for people living in the neighborhood. Have we, Mr. Rubin, have we been clear enough to give you direction for a next iteration? Do you need more input? What would be best for us to do now?
Well, I mean, I've been taking copious notes here, and I appreciate all the thoughtful input. I think there's great input being provided. If I can, maybe I can try and pick up on some of the big themes that I'm hearing. You know, I'm hearing from most of you, you know, this notion of a gathering space, central gathering space, whether that's done in lawn or some other material, you know, that is to be determined, but maybe de-emphasizing how big the habitat garden is, and maybe having that more as a peripheral and not taking up so much space. You know, really looking at that impact of the street, and of course looking at the size of the buildings and what the shade, and just how this is really a bit more of a courtyard as opposed to what you might see in a more traditional park setting. You know, fragmentation of spaces, you know, trying to you know, not look at these encircling or circuitous paths, and you know, maybe we can utilize some of the pathways that are already there at the perimeter as access, so that we can really do more open space and usable space interior. I mean, I've got a bunch of notes here, and I mean, I feel like I have enough here. It's just a question of synthesizing that and really giving this another once through.
Very good. Commissioner Davis, you had another comment.
Yeah, Mr. Rubin, it would be helpful if this comes back before us, if we can see some sections or other sort of 3-dimensional modeling of the space.
Okay. Yeah, there's a little grade change, and of course the facade of the buildings and pathways and those relationships.
In addition to that, understanding the height of plant material. So it's a little hard to know what's a ground cover versus a shrub or a hedge or a higher material. So,
okay,
thanks.
Do we have, we still have to discuss the naming of the park. Do we have other comments right now about the design? Commissioner Mitchner.
I just had a question. I can't remember. Are there any plans to go underneath the train tracks anywhere along Evelyn? I can't recall if there are any plans, whether not necessarily be a traffic thing, but are there any plans to put a walkway underneath Evelyn and the train track, or not underneath Evelyn, but underneath the train tracks in this sort of segment anywhere? Just a question.
I'll ask if Ed, do you want to take that question?
Hi, Ed Arango, Assistant Public Works Director and the City Engineer. Sorry, we're multitasking. We're hearing your feedback. We are chatting with each other. Staff is chatting with each other. So if you wouldn't mind repeating the question, as I'm actively talking to staff about our next steps and make sure we got enough feedback.
Okay, yeah, no, the question was just whether along this stretch of Evelyn, say going from Bernardo to more towards downtown, are there any plans? I can't recall to have a walkway or something that goes underneath the train tracks in this segment.
And as far as so you're talking about sort of the north-south direction along Bernardo, crossing Evelyn, heading to the north, and then going under the train tracks to the other side. Right.
Yeah, well, okay, let me say it again because I'm not. So yeah, just east-west along Evelyn between Bernardo and downtown Mountain View. I mean, maybe not going all the way to downtown Mountain View, but are there any plans to go underneath the train tracks anywhere? With,
So
like
we
Menlo Park and Palo Alto have sort of bikeways that and stairs that go underneath the train tracks to be able to. And I can't recall if there's any plans to do that on this segment.
So there's two different projects that do plan to do a grade undercrossing along Evelyn across the train tracks. The closest one to this location is the Bernardo Avenue undercrossing. This is a joint effort that we're coordinating with Sunnyvale, the county because of the expressway, VTA and Caltrain because of the train tracks and light rail. So we are we're in the planning effort, the conceptual planning effort to identify the layout across this, and we're looking at again going under Evelyn, under the train tracks, under the county expressway, central expressway, to come up on the other side of Bernardo to make this connection. Again, we're in the preliminary design stages, and we're not, and still sort of in the planning conceptual layout stage. And the other project, much further away from here, but at the transit center, it's a transit center grade separation project, where we've identified, it's a much larger project, doing similar, and the undercrossing that I mentioned at Bernardo would be just for bikes and peds. Similarly, at the transit center, also just bikes and peds. We would close Castro, being able to cross or get onto Central Expressway or cross Central and reroute the vehicles along Evelyn to the west and allow peds and bikes to go under the train tracks, under Central Expressway, and come out on the other side of Moffett. So those are the two projects that we do have planned to do undercrossing under the rail. Further down, we also have I'm sorry, there's one more. We have lots of projects. Rengstorff undercrossing. At the Rengstorff Park, we have a project to grade separate the train tracks from Rengstorff Avenue. And so that one is a vehicular and bike and ped undercrossing. So we'll keep the train tracks where they are and then have the vehicles on Rengstorff. So we would have to literally drop Rengstorff Avenue below the train tracks, so that way the vehicles, peds, and bicyclists can cross underneath it and get to the other side.
Perfect. That's what I was looking for. Especially the Bernardo one was interesting, and the downtown Mountain View one. Thank you.
I see that there is a member of the public with their hand raised, but the public input section of this item is closed. And since this item is coming back to us, there will be further opportunity for the public to address us at the meeting, or always send us emails and express your opinions. Commissioner Summer.
You had raised the topic of the name. Do you want to turn to that now?
Unless there is anyone who wants to make any comments on the design, I think we're ready to talk about the names, please.
Okay, so I wanted to offer my thoughts on the, there were the two staff proposed names, and then there was also the name suggested by a member of the public. I believe it was Lope Inigo, who was the Ohlone land grant recipient. I think that Evelyn Park makes a lot of sense. Flower Mart Park sort of has a nice ring to it, but it's not as compelling to me. I do actually like the thought of naming it after the Ohlone resident and land grant recipient. However, I wouldn't want to propose that to council without doing some tribal consultation first, because I mean, it first needs to be meaningful to the you know, the tribal members who live in the area. And you know, for it to be meaningful to me, I think is a secondary thing. So I don't know if it would be possible for staff to do some consultation. It's not really AB 52, but it's like that. And I believe there is a good organized presence from the Tamian tribe that you can locate. I don't know if Mr. Inigo was considered himself a member of that, but it's things are a lot different now, 150 years later. So my, just to reiterate, my perspective is that I do support the naming after the Ohlone resident, but I would want to consult with the tribal group or tribe. I don't know if it's a recognized tribe or not, before proceeding down that path. Otherwise, I support Evelyn Park.
Thank you. I believe Commissioner Davis, I saw your hand.
Thank you. So my perspective is that the park name should either have significant relevance contextually to the park or simplicity. So as I told Director Marchand, I'm fine with the staff recommendation. I would support that. I think Evelyn Park, boring as it is, makes a lot of sense. Locationally, it makes sense. I reached out to the Mountain View Historic Association people to find out if there is any history of Evelyn that's notable, either positive or negative. I haven't heard back yet. I think Ms. Rhodes' suggestion and detailed appeal for Mr. Ignacio is, I think the city should consider that as an important individual to recognize. I'm not sure this is the place to do it, other than it's just kind of the next park up needing a name. He sounds like an impressive individual. Anyone that owns 1,700 acres at Moffett Fields probably got a really good story. But my recommendation would be that be advanced to council for consideration of how do we recognize important historical or influential figures relevant to Mountain View. I don't know that I would as strongly support it as a name for this park. Flower Mart is okay. I'm fine with that since it does have some historical reference. If the city was to go with that, I would look for some kind of interpretive explanation at the park, a sign, a plaque, something that would tell people why it's called Flower Mart Park. So that's my thinking, and I think park names are also pretty subjective. I think there was a list of something like 25 suggestions. So I'm glad the city has some boundary conditions around which the park names are considered, but I would support the staff recommendation.
Thank you, Commissioner Mitchell.
So yeah, first I want to thank Amy Rhodes for taking the time to do the research and providing the background information on Mr. Inigo. It's definitely very interesting, and I guess I would concur with Commissioner Davis that maybe we can have that on the back burner, or the city can for if it doesn't get selected for this park, for some other recognition at some point in the future. I just I would support the two staff recommendations. Again, with the Mr. Inigo, I'm just not feeling the connection with this particular location and this park. So I'm fine with the two staff suggestions. It is an interesting point. It would be interesting to know who Evelyn was, or what the source of that is. And if we did do Flower Mart, I would also agree with Commissioner Davis. It would be good to have some historical, a placard or something like that describes that. And who knows, maybe the public art that gets picked for this park, if that name were to be chosen, can somehow tie into the name that's selected.
Thank you. Vice Chair Filias.
I too want to thank Ms. Rhodes for her email. And I absolutely support exactly what Mr. Commissioner Davis and Commissioner Mishner have just articulated. I too support staff's recommendation, and actually, when I was thinking about them, I was hoping that Evelyn is an appropriate person. I don't know anything about whether it was just the name Evelyn, just like over in the neighborhood here over by Cuesta Park. All the names are Hans and Gretel and Katie Court and all these other names that maybe don't have a significance, but they're names we use throughout the city. And so I don't know that whether there is any skeletons in the closets of Evelyn, but if there isn't, then I certainly support that, as we've done with other parks. Flower Mart Park, I just agree with what my colleagues have just mentioned. So I do, and so in a nutshell, I support staff's recommendation.
Well, that possibly puts me in a minority. I encouraged Miss Rhodes to come because I think the idea of Inigo Park is a really interesting idea. This Sunday, the Mountain View Historical Society had the cultural anthropologist for the local Indian tribes or native tribes discuss the history of the tribe, and Mr. Inigo was mentioned there as someone who got a land grant when the Spanish and Mexican government took land away from the missions and gave at least some of it back to the original owners. And I think that Evelyn is close enough to NASA. It would be very interesting to have a park named after one of our native residents. Although discussing it with the tribe certainly seems like a very good idea, but I think that would be a really original and interesting idea. So I was hoping that other commissioners might agree to send that on to council. Evelyn is the obvious choice, and of course that should go to council. My own feeling about Flower Mart Park is Peter Piper had a peck of pickled peppers. It sounds just the same. It's a tongue twister. I think it's too difficult to say. And I've lived in Mountain View for 40 years. I never heard about the Flower Mart. I know that Ferry Morse had a building there. I see what marker would be put there. Ferry Morse had a building here. It was a really important building for seed distribution, collection, or whatever. I'm more interested in sending Evelyn for sure, and Inigo just as an interesting thing to try to do to acknowledge as we talk about diversity in Mountain View, acknowledge the diversity of what was here before we came here, just like we are trying to put an emphasis on native plants. Let's put an emphasis on our inhabitants who were here before we all came. I don't know if I've convinced anyone with that, but we don't need to vote on it, I don't think. Commissioner Summer.
Well, I do find the possibility of naming it after Mr. Inigo to be compelling, but I don't want to proceed with that without consultation with the tribes.
Sure.
Definitely is Tamian, and I'm not sure if I think that Mountain View is sort of in a gray area between the two, Ramaytush and Tamian. That said, the whole history of that is, like, it's pretty sad, and like the major shell mound is under the intersection of 101 and 237, and it's like, oh my God, take their most sacred site and plaster it with a freeway, so in a way this park is a little precious for that name, but maybe it's meaningful to just get the conversation started. And so it does seem like we might have a little gap in time here between now and when this gets returned to us that could be used to consult with the tribes, and that way we could continue our discussion of having a little bit more information about how it would be viewed by the descendants of Mr. Inigo, or and people with the same ancestry as Mr. Inigo.
Great, thank you. Vice Chair Filius.
Let me just add, I'm not really against it. I just thought it'd be more appropriate as we develop parks that are closer to Moffett, that we would, it'd be more meaningful. And because I anticipate, whether it's the property that we just got over off Terabella, or as we develop other properties, towards Moffett Field, that we would consider it, more appropriate where the property actually was. So that I just want to clarify that.
All right, I guess I see here that we're supposed to select at least two names, but Commissioner Summer gave me an out. Could we, in fact, and not so much as an out as a step forward, could we, in fact, take a pause on this until the design comes back, and maybe contact the tribe or the representatives? And I think the cultural historian who spoke at the Historical Society is called Alan Loventhal, but it would be very easy to make contact with him for staff. Would that work for everyone? For myself personally, okay. So I see Commissioner Summer nodding her head. Anyone objects needs to say so now. And Commissioner Mitchner is no doubt there. Ice off. You can talk again, Joe.
Yeah. Yeah, so I'm fine with getting more research, but again, I'll probably, I'll be open-minded, but I'm leaning towards again, saving that name for a location that might be more directly tied, but doing the research at this point is something we would want to do at some point anyway, and it doesn't sound like we need to have this done tonight. And I'm also, we'll see what happens between now and the next meeting. I'm not in love with Flower Mart, but I don't know that I would necessarily switch it with Inigo either. So, but I think there's no reason not to do the research.
I think Evelyn is the obvious choice, but at least we can get the Inigo name into the conversation. Director Marchand, are we good on that? Is that?
From the discussion, I heard a majority of folks of the PRC at least willing to take the time, have staff reach out to tribal leaders and see what kind of history we can come back with, and considering the time that we have to bring back a new concept, I think we can make that happen.
So I think we're not really looking for history, we're looking for reaction to using the name.
Understood.
Okay. All right, in that case, I believe we are done with this item for this. This will come back to us. Is December too soon? January? What would be your expected timeline?
Staff is going to have to get together and discuss, but we want to bring it back to you as soon as possible. So let us work behind the scenes a little bit. But again, we are motivated to keep this moving as quickly as we can.
Very good.
We
Thank
do
you.
appreciate all of the comments and the feedback. I think it was good feedback, and Dave and the group can work with staff and take the next step. So thank you again.
Thank you, staff. Thank you, commissioners. Thank you, members of the public who came. And Mr. Rubin, I love the design, just maybe not in that area. In which case we are now at item 6, and we have a presentation about the Cuesta pollinator habitat update. Over to staff.
Assistant Director Sylvia, do you just want to do a brief introduction to the item?
Oh, sure. I've been corresponding with Green Spaces MV as to the status of their 1 year, marks 1 year anniversary of the Cuesta pollinator habitat. So they wanted to come bring you some updates of all the work and good things that they've been doing. So I'm not sure if Celia is here. I don't see her on the the attendees list. That is who is scheduled to be presenting tonight and who submitted the presentation. I know I did the presentation last time. I couldn't do it this time because I have not done any of the work out there.
Bruce has his hand raised.
What's that? Bruce does? Okay.
Okay, I'll have to do this on the fly. I have not talked to Celia about what she wants to do, but I'm going to do my best to update you. And
Bruce.
Director Sylvia, you can hear me okay?
Bruce, if you could pause for just a moment, I'm going to promote you to a panelist so we can see you.
Okay.
Yeah, so just one moment. And then do you have the presentation, Bruce, or?
I don't have a presentation.
You do, you can
I don't.
Oh, you don't. Okay. Let me pull it up and I can share my screen real quick.
Okay.
Bruce, I see that Shani has her hand raised. Has she been involved enough to make the presentation?
Here's Shawnee too.
I've
Oh yeah,
been
Shawnee, that's who you
involved.
meant. Yeah.
I've been involved in this, but I can only support Bruce if there is any questions or anything, because I've been volunteering there and planting. So
that's
yeah.
good. Yeah, so I'll start, and then if Shawnee, you can jump in and add to it, and that'll be good. And if Celia comes along, we can defer to her too. So yeah, as was mentioned, this project's been going on for about a year, and there was coordination between Community Services and Green Spaces Mountain View to get it started and make it happen. So for the course of the last year or so, we started with, so it's this corner of Cuesta Park that faces Cuesta and is adjacent to the annex part. So right next to the parking lot of Cuesta Park. So tucked to the side like that. And so a lot of hands-on work on the part of Green Spaces volunteers and others. We had a crew from St. Tim's Episcopal Church come out, and they've been involved too, and other people who are not directly associated with Green Spaces. So it's become a real community project. We started by digging up what was there and putting cardboard over it and mulch and everything and preparing it for the plants. And there's a major effort right now going on, planting effort. but the effort's been going on over the course of the whole year. There really hasn't been a break in it. With help from the city to bring mulch out that we carry to the locations we need. There's some irrigation work going on. We've had some issues with, pests that are, it's natural for them to be there, but it can create problems for some of the plants getting compromised. And so, yeah, we have our work days happening right now on the weekends for 2 to 4 hours, something like that. And a lot of interest and participation. So it's going pretty much great guns. So that's kind of, again, on the fly, that's what I've got to offer. And I'll let Shawnee add as she wishes.
Do you have, can you show, do you want to watch it tonight and look at the numbers, or do you prefer to have Celia, who's been organizing all of this, present?
Well, we have actually seen the presentation. The staff sent it to us.
Okay.
So,
well, there have been a lot of volunteer hours involved. There have been quite a few people involved. And like Bruce says, it's a real community effort, and it's creating a place where people gather, but not just to sit and barbecue, but actually to work together and do things together. So that's been very comforting to a lot of people in the last year, which has been quite difficult for many people. If you go to the next slide, I'll try and see. So yeah, so by now the entire area is mulched. There's irrigation boxes. There is almost 200 plants. The gophers have been problematic, but we're trying to catch up and continue to plant, even though they sometimes eat what we plant. And there is more to do there to make it more interesting, I guess, but you can see like the grass is gone. Staff planted some trees. We're trying, with the drought, it's been really difficult to keep everything going, but there's a few examples of some flowers. And when you go there and the kids play and you can see the butterflies starting to come and the insects, it's pretty amazing. These rocks were done at the harvest day. Kids painted them and put the names of the plants, and then Celia put them around the garden so people can see it. So you can see the rocks with the name of a buckwheat and manzanita. So that's pretty. I would recommend going there. It may be not impressive yet, but if you know what was there before in the process and how many people have been involved and how much they've invested in it, it is quite impressive. And thank you, staff, for being so supportive of it. Next, maybe. We need, if we're gonna put some furniture like a picnic table by the redwoods or a bench, then we need approval from the city. And we may need help with design and approval of education signage. The one comment I wanted to add here is that the volunteers are provided with insurance by the Santa Clara Valley Audubon Society, and Celia is here now. And so I'm going to just finish my sentence and then let Celia speak. But so I think one thing the city could do, and we've discussed this before, is find a way to allow groups like this to have insurance through the city so they don't have to search for a nonprofit to cover, like Green Spaces has to seek from Audubon. So if that's okay, I will stop talking and let Celia take over.
thank you.
Hi, sorry. I fell asleep next to my kids reading books. Yeah, so I think Shawnee did a great coverage. Thank you so much, Shawnee. I wanted to update a couple of things on there. Agree with everything she said. I know I've talked to Brenda. We proposed originally about the furniture and the signs. And so that was kind of our plan, was to follow up with that after we'd had a year hopefully success with maintaining volunteers. And so we've had a really great year of that. We had our anniversary work day as well this past Sunday, so I didn't get that into the presentation since I sent it out last week. But we had, I believe it was 28 or 29 volunteers, and we planted around between 250 and 300 plants just in that one day. So definitely worth going to check it out now. I've heard they're looking great with the rain from yesterday. We have another 500 plants to plant that we got through our Xerxes Society plant grant. So that'll be coming up as well.
Thank you, Celia. Are you open to possible questions from the commissioners?
Sure.
Commissioners, any questions, comments? I guess not. I did. I went and visited a few weeks ago before the rains, before the additional planting. It looked lovely. It looks cared for and loved. And thank you for all the work you're putting into it.
Thank you.
Vice Chair Filius.
Yeah, I wanted to thank you as well for what you've done. I was concerned when I looked at that chart for you, in that it looked like your numbers were down the last 3 or so meetings. And I was hoping that this wasn't going to fall on a group of 4 people to have to keep the project going. But if you had 29 people in this last meeting that after the chart was created, that's great news. And just want to compliment you what you have done, and wish you all the luck moving forward.
Thank you. Yeah, we've had, it was more seasonal because there's less that you can do in the planting season. It was too hot and too dry. So we were waiting for some rain, which we luckily got at least some of.
Commissioner Mission.
Yeah, again, I just want to thank you for all the work that the group is doing. Last time I was there was a couple weeks ago, so I'm now looking forward to going out and checking out all the new planting that's happening, and I think it will be nice if there can be some benches there sometime in the future. And Celia, I was actually toying with the idea of running down to your house and knocking on the door. Celia lives nearby, so. But I'm glad that you were able to make it.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, thanks to Shani for texting me. It woke me up.
Seeing no further questions or comments from other commissioners, I do hope the city finds a way to make it easier for volunteer groups to work with the city. I mean, one wants the city obviously has to have responsibility for the city parks, but there's, I think, an increasing number of volunteer groups, community-based volunteer groups who want to participate and beautify and increase the biodiversity in their neighborhood. It would be lovely if it was easier to do.
Chair Bryant, before I respond to that, would you like to open this to public comment?
I don't see any. Sure, I'll open it to public comment. If any other attendees want to address us on this item, please raise your hand. And I don't see anyone, so Director Marchand, your turn.
Thank you, Chair Bryant. I believe I have mentioned recently that we do have a new volunteer coordinator within the Community Services Department, and this is to lead the citywide volunteer efforts. I met with her just yesterday, and this is one of the things that I brought to her attention that I'd like us to look into and be able to find some path forward, knowing that there's not only this group that is interested, but hopefully others, and we can create a formalized process. So I started those conversations. She does have a lot of catching up to do and an understanding of all the responsibilities. She's not just the volunteer coordinator. She has some other responsibilities as well, but letting you know that this was one of the top of my list for her to be aware of, and then we'll be working next steps with city attorney and otherwise to find a path forward.
Great, thank you. Looking forward to it. Seeing no other commissioners wanting to speak, we can close this item and move on to item 7, commission announcements. No action will be taken on any questions raised by the commission at this time. Director Marchand.
Thank you again, Chair Bryant. I am going to actually turn it over to Assistant Director Brenda Sylvia. She's going to be providing some parks forestry updates, as well as an update on our biodiversity plan and urban forest plan.
Great. Thank you, Director Marchand. Good evening, commissioners. I'm excited to bring you a couple of updates from different divisions and about our biodiversity project. In parks, as part of the sustainability and climate resiliency priority of City Council's strategic work plan, we are working with American Green Zone Alliance to designate 2 future parks. You heard about one tonight, Evelyn and Villa, as green zones. So that will include using all electric equipment, including leaf blowers, lawnmowers, and trimmers, and certifying staff on sustainable equipment and practices. So we're looking forward to that. Also, to improve water use efficiency, we conducted a very comprehensive irrigation audit, and we are now implementing some of the findings that we found, taking steps to repair and adjust, upgrade equipment and practices based on the outcomes that we received from that audit. In our forestry division, city staff and Canopy held their first quarterly meeting to review progress on Canopy's scope of services outlined in their annual agreement. This was mentioned in the monthly report that they sent out the Young Tree Care Survey to all Mountain View residents that received a street tree within the last 3 years. And to date, we've received 68 responses, and Canopy will be reaching out with information and any kind of tree care that's needed for those young trees. We're also looking forward to Canopy assisting us and coordinating with several programs and activities, including Arbor Day, Earth Day, a street tree outreach campaign, and we're going to be conducting community forestry workshops at the Teen Center, Senior Center, and the library. Looking forward to those. Also, forestry staff addressed an illegal heritage tree removal. Steps were taken to establish a process, including notification, assessing fines, posting a tree removal notice on the tree that was removed, and mitigation. Out at Shoreline, we have our Sailing Lake erosion and dock replacement project. It is on schedule, with the old cement dock being removed and sediment grading and erosion work underway. During this phase, access to and around the lake has been limited. A partial area of windsurf beach is open with reduced operations and rentals, and loud noises are part of this part of the project, and it'll last for about another week. The entire windsurf beach will be closed again in the coming weeks for more grading work and installation of the sediment barrier and the new pier. Access to the North Shore area will be restricted through December, with alternate routes available from the Sailing Lake parking lot to the Bay Trail. And this Shoreline Wildlife Management Plan draft is currently being reviewed by city staff. The consultant will update the draft based on staff feedback, and we anticipate bringing that to PRC for comment in January. That's the plan. And biodiversity strategy and urban forest plan. SFEI, our consultant for the strategy and urban forest plan, is currently reviewing existing plans, studies, reports, and data. They're also starting to work with Davey Resource Group, who was the consultant for the community tree master plan. They're working on an agreement with them. SFEI will summarize their findings, including conditions, opportunities, and constraints, and they will bring this to you in February. And we are out to bid right now for the community outreach and engagement consultant for the strategy and the urban forest plan. The co-consultant is anticipated to be onboarded at the end of January, and the first action item will be a visioning process with staff and the community. I'm happy to answer any questions, but we got a lot of good stuff going on.
Well, sounds like a very exciting year ahead of us. Thank you.
And I will share a couple of other updates, and I appreciate those that were shared by Brenda. So just to look back a little bit, we held our Monster Bash on Saturday the 29th, another massive event. Thousands of people came out to Rangsdorf Park. We tried some new things and seemed to work well. And so thanks to everyone that came out for that to support it. This Saturday, we're excited. This is our second annual Teen Wellness Retreat. This is an opportunity for us to bring teens together. And it was a huge success last year. So we're working again with local businesses, community-based organizations to hold a number of workshops. So this is a conference style day filled with workshops to support health and wellness. It is free and open to Mountain View and Los Altos students that are in 6th through 12th grade. So looking forward to that. There's a number of fantastic teen programs that are being scheduled and recently have been scheduled. So we're going to have the teen coordinator actually come to a future PRC meeting and provide an update, and you're able to answer or ask more questions, and she'll be able to provide a little more context as to what we're doing to support our teens in Mountain View. So looking forward to that. The holiday bazaar at the senior center will return on the 19th. And we will have over 14 vendors. This is something that we've done historically at the senior center. I had to take a couple years off for COVID purposes, and happy to bring it back. And finally, almost finally, the community tree lighting celebration is scheduled for Monday the 5th, starting at 5:30 p.m. at Civic Center Plaza. Similar to Monster Bash, we're looking at opportunities to really move things around, expand what's available to the public as the crowd size continues to grow year over year. So therefore, we're trying to support that growth with additional amenities. So really looking forward to doing some new things this year. I encourage you all to show up and participate. And then finally, the Parks and Recreation Strategic Plan. We have completed and we are out for the RFP for consulting services. That went out on the 20th. Proposals are due December 1st. We held a pre-proposal meeting, and looks like we have more than 20 vendors that were at least interested in what was going on and what we were looking to do. So we look forward to receiving quite a number of proposals back. And we will be doing interviews of proposals in January and continue to move on and select a consultant shortly thereafter. Regarding our different strategic plans, just to keep an ongoing, keep each of you updated of what's going on with our each of our plans. We will put on future agenda items, just so it's on there as an agendized item moving forward. Something to the effect of CSD master plan updates, so that it's an opportunity for us to provide you with those updates as a agendized item moving forward. So just so it's all in one place, and we have a lot going on so that we can keep you all updated and provide some visuals as appropriate or timelines as appropriate as we move forward. So I believe that's the end of our updates.
Well, thank you so much. That was a very full update. Thank you. Commissioners, any comments, remarks?
I'd just like to wish everybody a happy Thanksgiving coming up, and hope you have a happy and safe holiday.
You too.
Very good. We will meet in December on our regular date. Very good. Thank you so much. Take care.